all of you. I think looks like there are 59 of you, to this event, Berkeley Then and Now, a virtual tour led by Tina Jones-Williams, Janet Byron, and Bob Johnson. And all three of these members of the Berkeley Historical Society have led wonderful walks, very popular walks. In fact, they've been walks that have come back by popular acclaim. And so, and they've led virtual walks in this COVID year. So we're really looking forward to this walk today. And it's going to be a comparison of then and now. And Tina Jones-Williams will be the earliest resident. She grew up in the 60s, I believe, years. And Janet Byron and Bob Johnson, I believe, came in the late 80s and 90s. So we're going to have some different periods. Is that right?
In the 80s. Yeah.
Mid 80s.
Mid to late,
okay.
Mid to late 80s.
Mid to late 80s. Okay. And you're going to talk about then and now. So they're all authors. Many of you might know the Julia Street.
Cut me off.
Oh,
Well, Janine, we can I can do that part.
okay, great. So I'll hand it over to Janet Byron.
Yeah, thank you, Janine, and thank you to the Berkeley Historical Society so much. I just wanted to ask everyone to put yourself on mute if you're not already, and then you'll be able to see the speakers when they're speaking. So we'll tell you a lot more about ourselves later, but to kick it off, I'm Janet Byron. I'm originally from New York, and I'm currently a communications person for Kaiser Permanente. I moved to Berkeley in 1989 to go to graduate school, and I'm the co-author of Berkeley Walks. And Tina Jones-Williams. And Tina, do you want to say hello?
Good evening, hi.
Yeah, so Tina is a Berkeley native, happily retired from the tech industry. She's written 8 books about growing up in South Berkeley, and I hear that there's one more on the way, the Julia Street series. Tina and I met in the Berkeley Historical Society booth during the Berkeley Book Festival a few years ago. And Bob Johnson, say hello, Bob, grew up near St. Louis. He lived overseas and came to Berkeley in 1985. He's a longtime Greenbelt Alliance board member and my co-author of Berkeley Walks. The three of us did a virtual walk together about South Berkeley for the Berkeley Path Wanderers Association in the middle of the pandemic. And the walk was adapted from a few of the walks in Berkeley Walks, and Tina provided some true to life authenticity about the neighborhood because she grew up in South Berkeley. So we had so much fun doing that we decided to do another one. All of us picked memories that we want to share of Berkeley then and now in a somewhat random fashion. So this talk, it's not meant to be comprehensive in any way. We look forward to hearing your thoughts and your corrections, and we'll have some time for discussion at the end. So please take it away, Tina.
Hi, good evening. I'd like to thank Bob and Janet for their kind invitation to join them on a walk down memory lane. My experience with memories tells me that usually one of two things happen. Either they fade with time or grow into tall tales told embellished over and over. It is my every wish that neither of those things happen here tonight. Pictured here is Herrick Hospital, where I was born in 1953, before it was part of the Altabates conglomerate. The next picture is a picture of schools that I attended in my early years. In 1958, when I started school, we walked several blocks from home in one direction to Lincoln Elementary School before it was renamed for Malcolm X. Several years later, for some reason, the district lines changed and I was transferred several blocks from home in the other direction to Longfellow before it became a middle school. Later, after I was graduated from Longfellow, I was part of the first integrated class at Garfield, before it was called King. In ninth grade, every ninth grade student in Berkeley who attended public school went to West Campus, years after it was called Burbank. The pictures here are current, but the buildings are very much as I remember them. This next picture is a picture of my family home. My story really starts here on Julia Street, just steps from Sacramento, a busy thoroughfare on one end, and California, a sleepy two-lane street on the other. My parents came to Berkeley in 1943. They bought their home and settled into an all-Black working class neighborhood where they stayed until they died. From as early as I can remember until about the late 1960s, the neighborhood was filled with families who took pride in their homes and businesses also owned by neighbors, all of whom were Black. There was Dr. Anderson, a family practitioner, Byron Rumford, one of the first Black pharmacists in Berkeley, who later went on to become an assemblyman, and an assortment of businesses, including a milliner who made hats for sale, beautifully displayed in her upstairs picture window. This picture shows the property as it is today, but it hasn't changed much. My father, a skilled carpenter, added the second story and the apartments in back. He said to generate income to feed his family, and the upstairs, a place to house his family. These girls, I have known these girls, many of them for over 60 years. One of them I've known from birth. We were always together. When you saw one of us, you saw all of us. This picture was taken, I believe, at a rally in our senior year at Berkeley High. This picture features Reed's Records and its owner, Betty Reed Soskin. Also pictured is Mr. Reed with Aretha Franklin. As kids, we had no idea the major role the Reed's family played in the music industry. Reed's Records was located on Sacramento Street near Alcatraz, several blocks from my home, from 1945 to 2018, over 70 years. From as early as I can remember, we went to buy LPs from my mother's collection, mostly jazz, and then later to add 45s to my collection. It was truly a family affair. Currently, Betty Reed Soskin, who is 99 years old, works at the Rosie the Riveter Center in the Richmond shipyards. She's an author who has written her memoir and is the oldest working park ranger in the country. On a visit to the Rosie the Riveter Center several years ago, my sister and I approached Miss Soskin saying, "We're from Berkeley and for years we shopped at Reed's Records." But before we could get very far into our story, she stopped us and said, "I know exactly who you are." And she did. She has a remarkable memory and is a riveting storyteller. And she has some firsthand memories of the shipyards during World War II that she shares freely. Looking at the picture, the facade of Reed's Records was virtually unchanged for the 70 years it sat as an icon on Sacramento Street, where my friends and I made a beeline to buy records whenever we heard a new song that we wanted to add to our collection and had saved the money to buy it. The building is empty today, but bears a plaque detailing the history and import of Reed's records to South Berkeley and beyond. Music City. Music City was further away from home on Alcatraz at above Adeline. So we weren't able to go there until we were older. We walked everywhere we went. We may have been given bus fare, but if it was within what we considered walking distance, we walked and we saved our money. Where Reed's Records was a neighborhood store, Music City was a destination. We always walked down Alcatraz, passing Kramer's beauty shop along the way. Kramer's was where every girl wanted to go to have her hair done. All kinds of women went to Kramer's. Glamorous women, plain women, women with jobs, housewives, and some women that we even considered fast women went to Kramer's. As we passed by, we would plot our futures, including our hairdos. Then we'd cross the street to Music City, gateway to everything musical. We went there for 45s, but little did we know that Mr. Dobard, the owner, was responsible for not only bringing major talent to the city, including James Brown in the 1960s, but they had their own recording studio in back and their own music label. The building today is a preschool. This picture shows Grove Street Park, now named Grove Park, and the South Berkeley branch of the public library, which is now called Taria Hall Pittman Library. My friends and I spent hours in both, but on balance, probably more time in the park than in the library. We passed these spots on our way to Iceland, where socializing was the draw more than ice skating. I can still remember the swoosh of cold air when we opened the door to go in and the smell of hot chocolate. Many lovely memories are of Iceland. What was a magical portal into a virtual winter wonderland is now a sporting goods store. By now, we had finally made it to Berkeley High School, and we were all about the socializing. In addition to participating in all the events at Berkeley High, my friends and I, the girls in the earlier picture and a few others, we started our own social club at the downtown YMCA. Our club was not affiliated in any way with Berkeley High. We elected officers. I was president a couple of times, and we had regular club meetings. The meetings were really only to plan our social events. We hosted dances at the Y, both the downtown Y and the South Berkeley Y on Russell in California. We held fundraisers, which meant that we sold candy, mostly chocolate bars and peanut brittle, and we sponsored bus trips to places like the Pleasanton Alameda County Fair and the Santa Cruz Boardwalk. Surprisingly, we did all of this without any adult involvement at all. I don't know how, and I don't know why we were able to sign contracts and enter into agreements as a bunch of high school kids, all under the age of 18, but we did. Thank goodness there were never any issues, just a whole lot of fun. Here's JCPenney's exactly as I remember it. We went there for our school clothes and functional day-to-day clothing. I remember going there with friends, making my choices, going up to the counter, asking to use the telephone, and I would call my mother and tell her what I was going to get and what the total was going to be. And I would get her approval, and then I would pay with a check that she had signed and made out to pennies, and I would just fill in the dollar amount, and it was all perfectly fine. Along the same corridor, that same block near Penny's was Bentley's, where we went to get leotards for our Afro dance class, and Kaufman's, where we bought fabric, patterns, and buttons to take to a seamstress to have dresses made for special occasions, like the junior and senior ball. We couldn't find any pictures of Bentley's or Kaufman's, but believe me, I'm not making it up. I hope other people remember it as fondly as I do. The Penny's is now Walgreens on the corner of Shattuck and Alstonway. Memories of Hinks are bittersweet. My mother shopped there occasionally for special home decor items or clothing for work. We even went a few times looking for things for special occasions for me, but it was not a particularly welcoming environment. My friend, Carol Kennerly, the former vice mayor of Berkeley, told me when she first arrived in Berkeley and went shopping at Hinks, she was denied the option of trying on hats, saying that she would have to buy it, nor would she be able to bring it back if it didn't work out. She recalls that not long after that incident, there was a public protest marching to demonstrate against Hinks' policies. The protest was not directly related to her issue, but it just shows the context of the times. Her story helped me make sense of having a milliner in our neighborhood. We were able to try on her hats before making our selections. Pre-COVID, a movie theater sat where Hinks it was. Speaking of protests, no talk would be complete without mentioning Telegraph Avenue. The summer before my senior year in 1969, I got a job through the Neighborhood Youth Corps at UC Berkeley, and my office where I was working was on right off of Sproul Plaza. I can't remember the details of applying for or being selected for the job. I remember being stunned, though, to find that I came from an underserved neighborhood. I didn't understand inequity because the people I knew always made it work. So my job was to answer the telephone, which rarely rang, and type things, which never seemed to go anywhere, but I had a bird's eye view of Sproul Plaza. And I could look out and watch the hippies on Telegraph and the protesters on the plaza. It was like theater, completely foreign to me. Giovanni's, Spanger's, and H's Lordships bring back fond memories. They're restaurants we went to frequently as a family to celebrate occasions, and later where I was taken infrequently on dates. They're all gone now. In the case of Giovanni and Spanger's, in the process of it being replaced by other businesses, and the plans for H's Lordship's location is hotly debated. It was graduation day, June 6, 1970, a picture perfect day. Me and 800 of my classmates gathered at the Greek Theater. And just like that, it was over. We scattered. Some went away to college, some stayed locally, some took jobs not far from home. No more Berkeley High graduations at the Greek Theater. The last class to graduate there was 2018. Now the graduations are held at Haas Pavilion.
I arrived in Berkeley as a graduate student in 1989 to attend the UC Berkeley Journalism School after working on Capitol Hill for Congressman Lee Hamilton in 88 and 89. So you can see that's me with the congressman he was chair of the Iran-Contra Committee at the time. And on the right, I was an intern police reporter in Nashville the summer between my 2 years of journalism school. Well, 2 months after I moved to Berkeley, I had my first earthquake, and it was a doozy. On October 17, 1989, at 5:04 p.m., there was the 6.9 magnitude earthquake. And the subsequent fires killed 63 people and injured nearly 4,000. I was in my second month at journalism school. A bunch of us were in the newsroom in a wooden building at Hearst and Euclid when it hit. I remember that there were fluorescent lights on chains in the old wood building, and they were swinging back and forth really fast. We went outside and talked about our first earthquakes. Then we went back to work. And then a few minutes later, the dean came running in. He said, "You're journalists, there's been an earthquake. Turn on the television." And we did, and saw that the section of the Bay Bridge's upper deck had fallen onto the bottom deck. So this picture, you can see the double-decker freeway in Oakland that had collapsed. Then 2 years later was the 1991 Hills Fire, which killed 25 people and destroyed 3,000 homes in Berkeley and Oakland, although mostly in Oakland. I was an intern then at the Oakland Tribune, working alone in the newsroom on a Sunday morning. My job then was to call the police, all the police and fire departments in Alameda County and Contra Costa County to see what was going on. Around somewhere in the 10 o'clock area, I called Oakland Fire and they told me there was a 2-alarm fire. And I called my editor and he said to keep an eye on it. And then when it reached 4 alarms, he said I could go and check it out, since there was nothing else happening except the Bay Bridge World Series game in the afternoon. I drove up to Grizzly Peak and Claremont. There were flames shooting up over the ridge, and I'm pretty certain I was the first reporter on the scene. Of course, all the Tribune reporters came in to cover the story, and I spent the day collecting quotes, excuse me, in front of the Claremont Hotel. A few years after that, I left Berkeley from 94 to 97 to live with a boyfriend in DC. And I wrote a book about country music. Then I moved back for good and bought a house on Alston Way without the boyfriend. Well, these two disasters had a huge impact on Berkeley over the following years. It woke Berkeley residents up to the risks associated with living in fire and earthquake-prone areas. One thing that the disasters demonstrated was the value of Berkeley's network of 136 paths as evacuation routes from the hills. Firefighters could not get through during the fire because the roads were choked with cars, and many of the paths were in disrepair or impassable because of vegetation and weeds. Many of the people who died in the fire were trying to evacuate but weren't able to. Several years later, the fire inspired the 4 founders of the Berkeley Path Wanderers Association in 1998 or so, including Jackie Ensign, who's shown here on her 90th birthday. And I think I saw her on the call, to start advocating for Berkeley's paths as public amenities, as well as important evacuation routes in case of disaster. I was on the second board of the Berkeley Path Wanderers Association in 99 and 2000, and I'm on the board now doing the newsletter. The Path Wanderers publish a map of Berkeley that includes all the paths, and it's really the best map of the city that you can find. It's now in its 9th edition, and it's sold 40,000 copies over the years. And we encourage people to put these maps in their Go kits and identify the quickest route to evacuate by foot. So you can see me here walking on Orchard Lane, and also my favorite path, Mosswood Lane on Panoramic Hill. And I thank Bob for taking those pictures. Berkeley's network of paths are public rights-of-way, which were designated when most of the city was subdivided around the turn of the 20th century. About 20 paths were never built out, And in recent years, the path wanderers have been building those paths and reclaiming the land for the public at a rate of about 1 per year, with an all-volunteer crew of path builders. We've also been raising money to install handrails and other amenities, and working with the city to prioritize path upgrades as funding becomes available. There's still a lot of work to be done, but the Berkeley paths have greatly improved over the past 20 plus years due to these efforts. Well, in addition to walking around town, I rode my bike from my first apartment on Peralta to the journalism school at Hearst and Euclid. When I first moved here, there was virtually no bike infrastructure in town. Due to the efforts of committed advocates, including Bike East Bay and in recent years Walk Bike Berkeley, Berkeley now has a network of bike boulevards and bike lanes, and we've made a commitment to reduce bike and pedestrian fatalities to 0. We're also seeing many roads being re-engineered to provide protected bike lanes, shown here. And you can see my husband, Steve Price, and I participating in the East Bay's first protected bike lane protest in 2018. We made a human protected bike lane. And there we are on the left with our electric bikes. And we're now car-free humans and get around town by foot, bike, BART, or as needed gig cars. Well, now I'll move on to arts and entertainment. When I moved to Berkeley in '89, living on a grad student's shoestring budget, I volunteered as an usher at theaters around town. I loved ushering for the Aurora Theater when it was in a ballroom with 67 seats at the Berkeley City Club, Cal performances, and also when I could at Berkeley Rep, but it was quite competitive to secure those ushering spots. So the Berkeley Arts District on Addison Street between Milvia and Shattuck, and this picture you're looking from Milvia toward Shattuck, was an economic redevelopment project for the downtown, a partnership of the arts and cultural organizations, private developers, and the city. In the 10 years or so after I moved to Berkeley, the Arts District really came together. There's a Addison Street window gallery featuring local artists, and there's a poetry walk featuring 3 tons of poetry with 123 poems by Berkeley writers and about Berkeley, which is curated by former US poet laureate Robert Hass, who's a local. And you can see one of them on the lower left of the screen. Berkeley Rep was founded in 1968 by a UC drama student who wanted to create an East Bay professional repertory company. Its first performance was in the International House, but they soon moved to a former commercial space on College Avenue near Ashby, next door to the Elmwood Theater. Here you can see on the left the theater company in 1968 and what that space looks like now. In 1980, they moved to Addison Street, and in 2001, under artistic director Tony Tacconi, they added a proscenium stage and a school of theater downtown. And the Rep received a Tony Award for Best Regional Theater in 1997. Bob said, Tony won a Tony. And then below you can see the Aurora Theater's new space in the Arts District on Addison Street, which has now 150 seats. So it's still a really intimate place to watch theater. And the Jazz School is next door. No longer on a shoestring, I'm happy to support these lively local institutions with my ticket purchases. The Freight and Salvage was founded in 1968 in a failing used furniture store, hence the name. Its first location was the site of this auto repair shop at 1827 San Pablo Avenue, And you can see one of the early schedules of music from the early 1970s. The original coffee house had 87 seats, and it quickly became a hub for music from all over the world, as well as folk and old-time music revival. In 1983, it incorporated as the Berkeley Society for the Preservation of Traditional Music, and they moved to the 220-seat site on Addison Street near San Pablo, around the corner from the original location. That's what you see on the lower left. When I moved to Berkeley in 1989, I started seeing shows there, including Loudon Wainwright, Ralph Stanley, and others. I like seeing the bluegrass shows, country music, and singer-songwriters mainly. I once took my mom, who's also on the call, to see a lovely concert of French cafe music there. The Freight moved to its beautiful 500-seat place to the east, much further to the east on Addison in the Arts District in 2009. Here I've seen Robbie Fulks, Asleep at the Wheel, Del McCoury, and Berkeley music students, including my daughter Julia, perform in poetry slams and chamber music concerts. Well, when I moved to Berkeley as a grad student, I loved going to see a double feature at the UC Theater on University Avenue. Anybody remember double features? Right. My favorite was Truffaut, Jules and Jim, and the 400 Blows. I also remember seeing a Wes Anderson double feature of his first two films, Bottle Rocket and Rushmore, and of course, the Midnight Rocky Horror Picture Show. The theater was designed by James Playcheck, who also designed the Berkeley Main Library, the John Muir School, and other civic buildings around town. And it opened in 1917, showing first-run movies. The UC closed in 2001 because the owners couldn't afford a seismic retrofit, and it was dark until 2016, when it reopened as a nonprofit music education and live music venue. I haven't been inside the new venue yet, but during the pandemic, they've offered live music outside the theater on Friday and Saturday nights. You can see a picture on the lower right that I took of the theater at the very beginning of the pandemic. And there's the schedule. Now I'm going to thank you for indulging me in reminiscences about Berkeley ice cream. When I moved to Berkeley for graduate school, there were 3 ice cream games in town, in my humble opinion: Ortman's, McCollum's, and Edie's. Now fast forward to 2012, and here's my daughter Julia on the right in her blue t-shirt, with her best pals at EC Ice Cream in the Elmwood, celebrating her 9th birthday. Her birthday party that year was a hike at Joaquin Miller Park and cones at EC. That's my girl. These girls are now graduating from Berkeley High and going off to college in the fall. I don't know how that happened. Well, my favorite of the Berkeley ice cream triumvirate was Ortman's at the corner of Calusa and Solano, where the Pete's is now. It was pink on the outside and pink and white stripes on the inside, with rotating seats at the counter. The proprietor, Bill Ortman, was born and raised in Berkeley, and his grandfather operated a dairy in Berkeley in the 1880s. Bill's father, Charles, was a lieutenant in the Berkeley Fire Department, and he was actually killed in 1939 while saving 3 children from a burning house. Bill ran Ortman's from 1950 until it closed in 1993, and he died in 2012. Apparently there was a second location on Fairmont in El Cerrito that didn't do as well as this one. My favorite flavor there was the chocolate shower ice cream with little shards of chocolate throughout. I don't know how they did it, and I've never seen anything quite like it ever again.
Janet, you said that it's where Pete's is now, but you meant to say it's where Starbucks is now, which is.
Oh yes, it's near where Starbucks.
Yeah,
That was a
right,
mistake.
okay,
Yes,
sorry.
thank you.
Sorry to interrupt.
So just up the street from Ortman's on Solano was McCollum's famous Highland ice cream, run by the proprietor, Robert McCollum. And you can see it, it's the best picture I could find was, this is the Solano Stroll, and it's in the background. Maybe you could point to it, Bob. I don't know. Like,
Yeah, here with this rectangular
Yeah.
sign up high. Mhm.
yeah. And I remember the McCollum's servers wore, excuse me, wore tartan aprons and paper tams. You can see it behind the dancers here. He died in 2015 at age 90. As I said, I was an Ortman's fan myself, so I can't say much about McCollum's ice cream. It's ironic that Ortman's is now a Starbucks and McCollum's is now a Pete's. Now, the other game in town was Edie's on Shattuck and Alston, where the FedEx is now, catty corner from where the Pennies used to be. I used to go there for hot fudge sundaes with my friends from journalism school. Ice cream maker, and I learned that ice cream maker William Dreyer, he was from Oakland, and he claimed to have invented the popular Rocky Road ice cream in the 1920s with his partner Joe Edie, who was a candy maker. So they put together the ice cream and the candy. Dreyer said he used his wife's sewing shears to cut up marshmallows and walnuts to mix into his chocolate ice cream. And they named the resulting blend Rocky Road to acknowledge the Depression era struggles of the time. Edie's and Dreyer's Grand brands, they were named for Grand Avenue in Oakland, were still nationally distributed, and they're owned by Nestle. So after 75 years downtown, Edie's in Berkeley moved out temporarily in the mid-1990s so that the building could be renovated for an Eddie Bauer's store, but Edie's never reopened after that. Well, these days there are so many ice cream options in Berkeley, plus frozen yogurt and non-dairy options, and ice cream served in donuts and cookies. I will buy a cone for the first person who can tell me which of these pictures is not a Berkeley ice cream parlor. You can either unmute yourself and let me know or put it in the chat. It's kind of a trick question.
What was the question?
Which of these is not a Berkeley ice cream parlor?
One picture. Only one picture is not.
Yeah, and I guess I'll tell you what's there. We've got
Well, Yogurtland was not an ice cream place. It was a yogurt place.
yeah. Okay,
like
so
that
I'll
a
say
lot.
not a Berkeley
Ice
cold
cream or
dessert
yogurt.
item. Not a Berkeley cold dessert item. Yeah, so we've got Almari ice cream, going from catty corner, going clockwise, or is it clockwise? Clockwise, cream, EC, Ben and Jerry's, Mr. Dewey's, and Menchie's, and then Milk Bomb. And in the middle is Yogurtland, which I was a big fan of.
Mm.
So
It's a green building on the right.
what's that, Jackie?
It's a middle picture on the right side with the green in it.
Yeah.
That's in Albany. Isn't it?
Correct.
Good.
Thanks, Jackie. I'm going to take you out for a cone.
Good.
although I grew up and attended college in the Midwest, in fact, in a place called Webster Groves, which is an older suburb of St. Louis, it's really rather like Berkeley in many ways. A lot of old homes with great architecture, and there's university there, but it's much smaller and less famous than Berkeley. But after college, I then spent 3 years in the US Peace Corps in the Philippines, running seminars for elementary school teachers. And that's me there in the Philippines at the left before mustache or anything or beard. I was, and then 13 years in Japan, working as a securities analyst. And there I am in Japan on the right picture. In Tokyo, I was aware that major areas of public open space were far from the city center where I lived. On settling in Berkeley in 1985, I was thankful that there were such great areas of public open space, forests, and agricultural lands nearby in the Bay Area. But I realized that much of that was in danger of sprawl development. I thus became involved with Greenbelt Alliance as a volunteer and then board member, with its dual mission to protect the Greenbelt of open space and to make our urban areas more livable and sustainable. A mission now intensified by the need to make the Bay Area more resilient to climate change. With Greenbelt, I started doing both urban and Greenbelt walking tours, and that's how I met Janet as we started co-leading walks. For an urban area, and let's focus on the city of Berkeley, public open space is an important component of livability. While Berkeley has a number of beloved parks, overall the city is underparked, which is rather a surprise to me when I looked at the statistics. You can see from the table on top that in terms of the percentage area of the city in parklands and the acres per 1,000 residents, it is far below San Francisco or Oakland. Now, the city says that if we include Harrison Park, the Bay Trail, East Shore State Park, Tilden Regional Park, and Claremont Canyon open space, it gets us up to 12 acres per 1,000 residents. Well, some of that may be fair, but Tilden is not in Berkeley, and it's not even in Alameda County. I fortunately live 3 blocks in the hills, 3 blocks from a Tilden trailhead, but for many Berkeley residents, it's not very accessible. Claremont Canyon, I guess, is accessible, except the only way to really get into it is a very strenuous climb. Well, from our then and now standpoint, the good news is that since 1977, the park acreage has doubled from 110 to 230 acres. The biggest addition is thanks to Cesar Chavez Park with 90 acres, as shown in the second table. Well, from 1957, dikes were built to create a landfill to the next to the marina, which was there for many years. As we noted, the city was even more seriously underparked back some years ago. It was thus decided, after the landfill had been capped, to make it into a city park. And planting was done on the mounds from the early 1980s. On that former dump site, Cesar Chavez is now a park for hiking, biking, dog walking, and kite flying, and includes a wildlife sanctuary. In 1991, the park opened as North Waterfront Park and was renamed as Cesar Chavez Park in 1996 for the farm labor leader and civil rights activist. Well, another park that helped increase our level of parks was Strawberry Creek Park. From 1904 to the 1950s, the Santa Fe Railway ran passenger and freight trains through Berkeley, including a freight yard between Addison and Bancroft. And until the 1970s, freight trains continued to pass here. So this is a little earlier photo that shows a passenger train next to what was then the Santa Fe station. I think it was later the Santa Fe Bar and Grill is now a school, a private school. Which is pictured here as in the current picture. Well, behind this, to the south, if you will, the next block is where the railway yards were, and the freight yard. And there were also, because there's freight yards there were many industrial buildings adjacent to it. And these buildings still stand, although they've generally been converted to other uses. Well, the freight yard itself became Strawberry Creek Park. And at this location where it was also famous because of activists working hard for it, the creek was daylighted. It means it was taken out of the culvert and made into more of a natural creek, which is one of the first cases of that happening in the country. The park itself opened in the 1980s and is, of course, a considerable asset to the neighborhood.
Just wanted to add here that the house that I bought in 1997 is on Strawberry Creek at Alston Way. And my property line goes through the middle of the creek. So I actually own a little piece of it. I was involved with a neighborhood group, Friends of Strawberry Creek, in the late 1990s. And I'm doing a live stream about Strawberry Creek Park with a watershed group called Holy H2O on June 12th.
Okay, well, some other sections of the Santa Fe Railway Corridor have been added recently as a greenway along the West Street Path, which is called the West Street Path. That's shown in the picture at the left, and the top here is the new greenwayers that follow the Santa Fe. On the lower right is Cedar Rose Park, which opened around 1980 and is partly based on Santa Fe right-of-way lands. However, much of that corridor is still closed off, despite community efforts to make it a public greenway. Active has been trying for many years to open up more of the corridor to the public, though the city seems to be dragging its feet, saying, well, they're toxic in the soil that need to be remediated and so on. Nevertheless, some of it does get used informally, despite the signs. For example, by people and their dogs in need of outdoor play space, as in the picture, the lower right. Ohlone Park is another park with a good story about citizen activists. BART had cleared the land of houses running along the Hearst, I believe it is, and to put the railway line underground. And BART had ideas about developing the land afterwards with apartments, and there was also talk of putting a city college there. But citizen activists had other ideas, and after considerable battle, were able to make it into a 10-acre, very well-used park. Well, we can't talk about parks and citizens without mentioning People's Park, of course. Place where original conflict was mainly in the 1969 to 79 period, when the park was de facto established after UC Berkeley cleared the land to build student housing, but apparently did not have the funds to proceed further at that time. Activists declared a much needed public open space, and many volunteers worked to make it a park. The university, of course, was initially opposed to this, but at one point it seemed like the university was willing to compromise. But the state UC regents said no, and Governor Reagan sent in the National Guard to stop the big demonstrations in Berkeley. It thus became a social conflict emblematic of national trends in the 1970s. Some 40 years plus later, the university is again trying to build housing there, including some for homeless people. And activists are again pushing back. Many Berkeleyites feel that the UC is insensitive to the community and its needs and the landmark status of the park. Right now, it's a big homeless camp. I believe Harvey Smith is on the call and perhaps can tell us more about that when we get to the comment period coming up in a few minutes. On another front, housing is a key issue that has led to some historic conflicts in Berkeley, and it seems change is now again afoot. My involvement in Greenbelt Alliance with its promotion of infill housing and my 8 years as a Berkeley Landmark Preservation Commissioner has given me some varied perspectives on these issues. We can produce more housing in Berkeley without destroying city character, but it requires proper planning. If we go back to the early part of the 20th century, very attractive apartment buildings were being built that worked well even in neighborhoods of single family homes, such as these 4 examples, which are all in the Elmwood district. The one in the upper right here is Hillegas Court Apartments, which is one of my favorites for the fine detailing of the style. The owner was impressed by Swiss hotels and wanted to pattern after that. Here's some other well-designed multifamily buildings from that period in other parts of Berkeley, including in the lower left here, one designed by Julia Morgan on Panoramic Way, one in the lower right at Northgate, the corner of Euclid and Hearst, designed by John Galen Howard, the campus architect, one in the upper right on College Avenue, designed by Walter Ratcliffe Jr., and then of course in the middle is Normandy Village, designed by William Yelland. And I understand that last weekend, this became quite a sensation on TikTok, and there were scads of people there all taking their selfies in front of Normandy Village. Well, one thing is that as the city moved to expand single family zoning and other measures, in much of Berkeley, it ended construction of apartment buildings like these. But then the city opened up much of the flatlands to apartment construction from the late 1950s, and particularly during the 1960s. Buildings were plopped down willy-nilly anywhere. Much of what was built was unfortunately architecturally unattractive, not well oriented to the public street, unsympathetic to the surrounding ambiance, rather poorly constructed and often not seismically sound. Many of the same liberal activists of other 1960s battles, such as People's Park and the free speech movement, did not like what was happening to their neighborhoods, as well as there were plans to expand the West Berkeley industrial area. And they worked to pass the Neighborhood Preservation Ordinance of 1973. One can well understand the good intentions of this measure. And indeed, today, the older single-family homes in these neighborhoods often look better than many of the poorly built 60s apartments. However, the city was entering a period in the 1970s and 80s when housing was not keeping up with demand anymore. According to one source I saw, only a few hundred additional homes were built from 1970 to 2000. Now, as part of an area-wide trend, housing prices have soared out of reach of a great many workers in Berkeley, from teachers to retail workers, and including the offspring of Berkeley residents who can't afford to live in the city where their parents live. I couldn't possibly afford to buy a home in Berkeley. I was lucky to buy one in 1985, but Berkeley would not be a city where I could live now. But in signs of yet another shift, the first mixed-use project downtown by a private developer in more than 30 years came in 1996. The Shattuck Lofts here at 1849 Shattuck, the northeast corner with Hearst. And there's a plaque on the building, which I took a photo of here on the right. Other projects started to provide multi-unit housing to try and address affordability and the lack of large building sites. This trend has accelerated in recent years, with much of the new housing being better in design and construction than most of what was done in the 1960s. Protection of our valuable greenbelt of agricultural natural lands and reducing the environmental impact of new constructions means we need to build more in existing cities. Low density development built farther out means more traffic from auto dependency, longer commute times, and the resultant more energy expended producing greenhouse gases. Some things such as ADUs, which are additional dwelling units, granny flats and so on, moving away from pure single family zoning. And as I pointed out earlier, many of those single family areas have really attractive apartment buildings that exist in them. Denser development near transit and on major corridors have the potential to help easing housing shortages. And the city is committed to moving forward on these fronts. But as with any changes, there are some controversies. And these are all examples from recent years in Berkeley. The one on the lower left here is senior housing down on Sacramento. Now, I myself am not terribly keen on 12 to 18-story towers, but for the long shadows and parking issues they create. But there are and they are certainly not appropriate for much of the city. But there are many ways to increase density without going to such great height. And it's important to, these examples are generally in the 4 to 6 story range. And it's important to note Paris, which is such a beloved city, has generally 6, 7 story buildings that, you know, that kind of density seems to work very well for you know, central areas of the city. Now, some of the other ways that we can build more housing and fit it in are townhouses, duplexes, quadruplexes, garden apartments, accessory dwelling units, and so on. I particularly like, in the lower left photo, this is a historic triplex, if you want to call it. It's three homes on one lot. There's 2 come forward and one is in the back, and it fits. It's on spruce and fits very well into single family neighborhood, but achieves higher density. This one on the right is an example of kind of loft style apartments. It's built in West Berkeley in the fast changing industrial area, and this probably sort of modern design is kind of appropriate for that area. But of course, it's very important to try and have sensible design guidelines to avoid the mistakes of the 1960s. And form-based codes, which are now being adopted in many cities, can help create more harmonious and appropriate development. Should be considered for Berkeley. This is where you set parameters for certain areas for the form of the buildings, and it's something that can really help cities to manage the growth. Well, in any case, saying no to all change is not going to solve Berkeley's problems or aid in addressing environmental issues. So the key is working to guide the change in beneficial directions. Well, stepping off of housing, one final issue I wanted to wrap up with is to talk about one particular building on Telegraph. This is an even older photograph than the period we're going to be talking about, but this is the one I found. Lucky's Market was on Telegraph at Haste for many years. It had a poor record of not hiring African Americans. In 1964, CORE, Congress on Racial Equality, staged a shop-in where activists filled up their shopping carts and then left at checkout saying they would not pay to the discriminatory hiring practices. And then the employees had to put everything back on the shelves. Lucky's eventually signed an agreement to hire more Blacks, but soon closed this particular store, probably as a kind of revenge back at Berkeley for having had this movement. In this historic photo, and one we're going to look at in a moment, you see this brick building in the background. There it is again, and this time in color of red brick. That, of course, was the Berkeley Inn, which was destroyed in a fire in 1990. And for a long time, it was a vacant lot. There was considerable controversy about when, between the city and the developer and when they were ever going to build it. And finally, just recently, something has been built there. In any case, the building in question that was Lucky's was the Forum, which was an early espresso cafe and restaurant. It sometime included other places. There's one here called it's shared with something called Xanadu. I didn't find anything about Xanadu, but the Forum was there for a number of years in the 60s. And then from 1969 to 1975, approximately, I'm not sure on the ending year, but it was the One World Family Commune, which served vegetarian food. They also had a bakery, a clothing store, and a nightclub. It was headed by Alan Michael, also known as Alan Michael Noonan. And he was the spiritual master who emphasized sharing at all levels, from the joint bank account they had to sharing in work. And you can see here in the kitchen there, we've got the men and women sharing the jobs, including child care and so on, and cooking. Alan Michael also claimed to be a galactic messenger, a direct channel of the universal mind after his cosmic initiation in 1947. So it's a rather interesting character. And of course now it's Amoeba Records has been since 1990. And there's a mural on the side depicting events of the free speech and People's Park movements. And thus that building has an interesting role in Berkeley history. And 1960s history is further memorialized on the wall. And there's even a picture of its Forum and Xanadu is on the wall, the earlier reincarnation, a later reincarnation of the building after Lucky's. I don't know, you know, what's happening in record stores. I don't know how much longer Amoeba will be there since everybody seems to be going digital now. Well, thank you for all your attention, and thanks to Berkeley Historical Society for providing this opportunity to present some of our thoughts and memories. In a moment, we'll open up for questions and comments, but I wanted to mention the book Berkeley Walks, which is now being published by Heyday Books, that Janet and I co-authored. It's now in its second edition with expanded edition, has 21 self-guided walks featuring architecture, street trees, where famous people lived, and other bits of Berkeley history. It's available in local bookstores. I believe the Berkeley Historical Society also has copies, or we can sell you a signed copy if you contact us, our website, www.berkeley-walks.com, and you'll also find there some new walks, which are PDFs that you can download for free. Also, Tina's books are available at the Berkeley Historical Society and online, and I imagine she is eager to lead in-person walks again when it's appropriate to do so, as we all are. Okay, I think we could go to questions and comments now.
Okay, wow, what a lot of information there. Rich, I see you're raising your hand.
I can take you down memory lane and comment on something you said, Janet. You hit close to home when you showed me Ortman's ice cream store. Bill and Sue Ortman were like second parents to me. Their son Chuck and I grew up together. In fact, I was his best man, and he just passed away a couple months ago. I agree with you. Ortman's ice cream was by far the best ice cream in town. Mr. Ortman used to employ a lot of Chuck's friends. However, there was one flavor that McCullum's had that Bill Ortman did not make. And McCullum's, as you recall, was just up the street. So whenever I wanted that ice cream, I would sneak into McCullum's ice cream, making sure that Bill Ortman couldn't see me, so that I could have that particular ice cream, and I'd sneak out the door to make sure that I was not observed by Bill or or his son.
What was that flavor?
You know, that's good, Bob. I can't remember now.
Just there was one, okay.
I do not remember. Also, Tina, do you remember the Key System bus trains that ran down Solano Avenue, from Solano down Shattuck Avenue and across the Bay Bridge?
Well, I'm not sure exactly about the Key, but I will say that the Santa Fe train ran down Sacramento. Maybe, you know, I have a horrible sense of direction or even distance, but steps from our home.
Yeah.
And my brothers claim, my older brothers claim that they used to ride the train from home to Burbank, which was West Campus now, to school on mornings. Nobody can really verify that story, but it's folklore.
There was also the story about Bobby Kennedy, right?
Well, you know, that's interesting. Thanks for bringing that up. When I want to say when he was running for president, one afternoon out of nowhere, the Santa Fe train, or a train, stopped on Sacramento and Julia, my street. And Bobby Kennedy was on board. He came off and gave what we thought was an impromptu speech. People gathered from everywhere. I mean, it was just amazing. It was it was organic, by osmosis, whatever. People just showed up, and it was absolutely one of the most memorable things in my life. People remember it, but nobody can find it documented in any real reputable place. So there's that. The other thing that I remember clear as day, we had to be at home in bed before that final train whistle blew at night. And that would be like 1 a.m. We were, you know, older teenagers by that point, but if we weren't, there was real trouble.
The Key System train ran across the Bay Bridge. It started at Solano, went down Shattuck Avenue, and then the lower half of the Bay Bridge was relegated for the train and trucks.
The
Well,
train and trucks and my mother.
Yeah. some
She
people
always
cheat.
found her way on that level
You're
somehow.
right. Some people
Right.
cheat.
You
Right.
know, the Bay Bridge actually, before the key system went out of operation, the
Right.
Bay Bridge could carry about twice as many people as it does now because of those trains.
That's right.
So they had to build, now BART and the Bay Bridge carry about as many people as the bridge itself did, you
That's
know,
right.
after right around World War II.
That's right.
Mm. Well, I'm old enough to remember when the Southern Pacific train ran through the tunnel and would take you down to the Oakland ferry
The
landing
mall,
Mole.
and
the
take
mall.
you to
Mhm.
San
Fairyland
Francisco.
At the lake. At the lake. Yeah.
It wasn't at the lake, it was,
In the bay.
Oh, Fairyland.
Yeah, there was
no,
a
no,
mole,
no,
was a
it was
pier, a
Cape-
pier in the bay, yeah, where they
Pier, yeah,
took the ferry. You went right from the train to the ferry, right?
Yep.
correct.
Well, at one time, you could take streetcars all the way from San Francisco to Sacramento. There's streetcars, you could just go from one to another. So you could take one from San Francisco up through Berkeley and all the way up to Richmond. And there were streetcars all the way to Sacramento at one time.
Wow.
Is that called the Exurban? Or, no? Somebody wrote that they, someone else wrote in the chat that they had ridden the train to Burbank. That was.
Yeah, I think somebody, that was the SP, which, you know, which is where the Amtrak runs now.
Oh, someone said, Yorkman Lowe said they rode a Santa Fe train from Oakland to Bakersfield in spring of 1956.
I guess, is there a train that runs from Oakland to Bakersfield anymore?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, it goes up, it goes north up through Richmond, along the bay, up to the Delta, through Martinez. And yeah, and and then goes down the valley. And then there's another spur that goes up to Sacramento and Auburn. And I think some trains, well, there are trains that run to Tahoe and Chicago.
I see
Okay,
that
well,
Harvey,
that's good.
I see that
good that-
Harvey has his hand raised.
Does anyone have questions about the images we looked at? I mean, if so, I can.
Wait, Bob, somebody, Janet, do you want to mention, you were mentioning somebody has their hand raised. You want to call on that person?
Yeah, Harvey has his hand raised.
Harvey, are you?
You're muted, Harvey.
Okay, unmuted. Okay. Well, I also, you know, I think some of you know, I also do walks, but my walks focus on the period of the New Deal. And, you know, I've got a book, Berkeley and the New Deal. So what I find interesting, comparing the now and then, is that Bob was talking about construction and different periods of in you know, ways we've handled new construction in Berkeley. And during the period of the 30s, it was almost totally public oriented projects. And nowadays we focus almost totally on market rate projects. So it's a really vivid contrast. We didn't build public housing in Berkeley during that period, but there was a lot that was built in San Francisco. And of course there was wartime housing in the area. So I find that a very vivid contrast. Bob also mentioned People's Park, and I could go on forever about that, but I can refer you to a website. It's called People's Park Historic District Advocacy Group. And if you just Google that, you'll go right to their website. And we've been doing a lot of work to, as well as other people in the city, because the issue, you know, City Council discussed this last week, and we find the university is more and more trying to gobble up the city of Berkeley. And it impacts housing in the sense that the gentrification that Bob spoke about is just being increased exponentially. And so we have this rush to build more housing, but without really looking at affordability. And that's part of the issue with People's Park. And the university, you know, teaming up with these for-profit investor-owned corporations that really, again, don't focus on the issue of affordability. And it's not anything that Berkeley can really solve. I mean, you know, the president gave a speech yesterday. I didn't really hear, I heard infrastructure, but at some point this issue of housing is just got to be a lot more visible, and it's got to be a national effort, because one city can't deal with it, you know, and I think Berkeley shows that. So I really encourage you to look at that website. And we recently put together an open letter that's directed to a lot of the public officials, but we have, you know, incredible response from professors to just ordinary people reacting to the issue of destroying not only People's Park, but as you know, Bob mentioned the architects Radcliffe, Julia Morgan, and we'll also include Maybeck. But one of the project number one at Oxford University will destroy 3 historic structures. And so I just want to alert people to that is going on. You'll find a lot of information in any of the papers, whether it be Berkeley Side, Berkeley Daily Planet, or the Berkeley Times.
Harvey, could you put the link in the chat?
Oh yeah, sure.
Okay. Well, I have some notes from the chat, and maybe going back to Tina's talk. We have a thank you, Tina, from Giannina Irlando. And she said that she grew up in South Berkeley, and she said so few people have written about South Berkeley, and few people who understand how vibrant and unified it was. And fewer still who remember the corner stores and the churches and how the community was connected. So that's a thank you. And I don't know if Giannina wants to ask a personal question or comment, if you're still here.
So Janine,
Huh?
if she's not, I do want to just say one thing along that same line. The first neighborhood walk that I did, I do them now twice annually, well, when we can, but it really is an easy 2-mile, 2-hour walk, you know, where we just talk about people, places, and times that I think should be remembered. But the first one that I did for the Berkeley Historical Society, and there were about 30 people that showed up, and they were all white, all elderly, including a gentleman who has now passed on, who delivered newspapers in my neighborhood in the 30s. But at the end of the walk, one of the men said to me that most of them said they had never been to the area, never been to South Berkeley, which, you know, makes sense. You know, you drive down Sacramento, and if you don't have a reason to stop, you don't stop. But one of the gentlemen said, it's amazing, their lives paralleled our own. And, you know, that's the whole point of writing the books and telling the story. It's to let people know that, you know, what was happening in the East Hills and other parts of Berkeley were also happening in South Berkeley, just with all Black people doing it. So, you know, that's the point of telling the story, so that people understand that we have a lot more in common than we don't. So.
Tina, there's also a question here whether all the customers at Kramer's hair salon were Black.
No, as a matter of fact, certainly most were, but there were, as I said, all kinds of women, even fast ones.
Yeah.
Are there still fast women? I don't know.
Yeah. Somebody saying that they remember that Spenger was once the busiest restaurant west of the Mississippi. Yeah, I think I'd read that once it was, I mean, it was, in terms of its gross sales, it was tremendously successful restaurant at one point.
You'd have to wait more than an hour any Friday night for dinner.
Well, and the Shattuck Co-op was at one time apparently the busiest supermarket west of the Mississippi in terms of sales per square foot. And I was there when it opened in 1959, and I got a balloon. They handed out balloons to the kids at that time.
Yeah.
And somebody's asking Jen about, let's see, the '89 quake was during the Bay Area World Series, is that right? But
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
19,
she
the
made
91
a
the
slide
91
out.
fire was also during
Oh, it was
important
during
baseball
the
games.
fire.
Giants and the A's, yeah.
Right.
But the 91 fire was also during a baseball game, because I remember reading about how things from the fire, debris from the fire went up in the air and came down in the baseball stadium.
It was in October, I know, when the 49ers were playing.
Was it a football game?
It was a
Okay, I
football
knew
game,
there was a
yeah.
game there. Okay,
Yeah, my mom is raising her hand.
yeah.
Mom,
How do I get am I on a picture?
Yeah,
Can you see me?
yeah.
Okay,
Raise it
I'm
up.
going to show Tina.
Raise it up.
When I was
Raise it higher.
I live in New York, and I visit Berkeley to visit Janet and Julia. And in 2015, I'm sorry, in 2016, Julia had a bat mitzvah, and Janet sent me out on a walk with a camera to take a picture, to send this out to people to save the date for Julia's party. And it shows the street sign at Julia in California.
Uh-huh.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. Well, I will tell you to tell Julia that on 1801 Ashby is a mural depicting the history of South Berkeley from the time of the Ohlone Indians till now. And I'm honored to be on there, but even more importantly, Julia Street is pictured as one of the streets that is the heart of South Berkeley. So let your granddaughter know that her namesake is on that mural as well. So,
yeah,
There's also a Byron Street.
yeah. Can you?
oh
hold
my
it?
goodness.
That's right.
Mom,
Hey,
hold
I'd
it
like to
up.
show a picture. I don't know.
Oh, there it is.
Oh,
what
that's
you're
cool.
Yeah, move
I
it
just
over
came
to the
across
right.
this the
A
other
little to
day.
your,
Raise it.
Little to your
raise it.
left, Mom. There.
There
A
it is.
little higher.
oh, that's cool.
Yeah,
Little higher.
A little higher.
And she's
Perfect,
gonna have to
perfect.
speak for
There
us
you
to
go.
see it if we're on speaker view.
That's cool.
And
I'd like
Mark
to,
has a headline
can
to show
people
us.
see this headline I have?
You have
Yes.
to raise it. There you go.
Is
Yep.
that visible?
Farther away from you're too close to
Yeah,
the screen.
I see.
There you go. There you
A little
go.
down a little. Yeah,
Perfect.
there you are.
Oh,
Okay.
there you go.
This is the Chronicle, obviously, right after the '89 earthquake.
Wow,
I just came across this about 2 days ago. So.
Wow.
that's great.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, moving along, there was discussion of the Berkeley rep. And somebody mentioned the name of the man who started the Berkeley rep. I believe it was Liebert. Was it Bob Liebert? Does anyone remember?
Michael.
It was
Michael.
Michael Liebert.
Michael Liebert. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay. Does anyone have any recollections of Liebert and the early days of the Berkeley rep when it was on college or?
I used to go there, and not only did they have fantastic performances, but at the intermissions, they had the most unbelievably good baked goods and treats. People would line up, and it was in this warehouse on College. You can see what it was like. It was unbelievably primitive, but the sets were always fantastic. The acting was great. And one of the people I remember particularly was, oh gosh, his name will come to me, Joe Spano, S-P-A-N-O. If any of you ever watch NCIS, he is Agent Tobias on that. He, for years, has been on that show. He was also on Hill Street Blues, and if you saw the movie Apollo 13, he was one of the NASA engineers there. At one point he says, "Oh my gosh, I hope this doesn't make NASA look bad," and that's when someone says it's our finest hour. Joe Spano was a Berkeley rep guy in College Avenue. I saw him do Hamlet and all kinds of stuff. It was an absolutely fantastic place. It was dirt cheap to go there. And, you know, there were these fantastic productions, very, very high level but very accessible to everyone. So it was a wonderful, wonderful place. In fact, when they moved downtown, we subscribed there for a while, became more expensive. And there's gone toward more experimental stuff. The one on College was more classic and contemporary plays. And it was just absolutely magical. Everybody who went there remembers that very fondly.
Mm. Yeah, I guess that is a theme, isn't it? That sometimes the smaller, more intimate settings have a certain kind of they mean more in the end. So it's always a trade-off. I guess there's also freight and salvage. Do people have memories about the different freight and salvage venues and how they felt about the different venues?
Did anyone go to the original one?
Yeah, I remember going there once.
Uh-huh.
I remember going to the second one, the one that was around the corner off of San Pablo, and they had all these funky mismatched chairs, just rows of funny, weird chairs. So one of the things was to get there early and try to get one of the better chairs.
Yeah.
Yeah, Janet took me to Freight and Salvage, the one on Walston,
Addison.
Addison, one of my visits.
Yeah.
I went to the early one. I saw Commander Cody and the Lost Planet Airmen, Joy of Cooking. I remember particularly. It was a very good spot. The Hooch too, I would go to, because when people just sing one song, they usually sing their best song, which I liked.
Is that an open mic kind of thing?
Yeah, open mic. They still have Hooch there at the current Freight and Salvage occasionally.
I was fortunate enough to perform at the second Freight and Salvage many times. So.
Oh, in what form?
I was the accordionist for a Balkan women's choir called Savin.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
But yeah, no, I attended concerts at all three, but only got to perform in the middle one.
Uh-huh.
So I see we have another comment. Phil Allen says, remembers the in-house baked goods at the Freight.
Uh-huh.
So that's two memories of intermission being more memorable than the performance.
There's also been other ice cream places mentioned, Bott's in the Elmwood and McFarlane's on University were also mentioned as other ice cream places.
I think there was a Swenson's too.
Oh, and then Fenton's, it said.
Well, there was also Vivoli's, which is where Panini is now. In fact, I was there the day Vivoli opened in probably about 1980, I think it was.
Yeah, they made great ice cream.
Oh yeah, yeah, wonderful gelato.
Janet.
Yes.
Swenson's was in Manhasset when you were growing up.
But I think I read that there was a Swenson's in Berkeley.
There's still one in San Francisco right now.
Yeah.
It's the only one I know that's nearby.
There was a Swenson's
in
on
Oakland.
there was a Swenson's on Euclid, right near Hearst,
That's right.
right across campus for many, many years, and it was oh gosh, it was great.
I think it's the last one in the Bay Area, other than in the East Bay, I think. Yeah, San Francisco still has one on Union Street. Fenton's was in Oakland on Piedmont Avenue.
Okay, we have a recent question. What is the most med-like cafe left? Like Cafe Med, Mediterranean.
That's a good question. I don't know.
We're going there when there was still smoking.
Yeah.
In cafes, and that was the smokiest of all.
Days are gone, I think.
Well, there's a Cafe Trieste still. Is that still existent on San Pablo? That was, I guess.
It's gone.
What?
I think the cafe's still there, but it's under another name now, I think.
Yeah.
It's basically the same thing, but I assume different ownership because the name has changed. I think there's Cafe Trieste is still in North Beach.
Okay.
I used to say that like Berkeley had an infinite capacity for cafes. It's just, people just keep opening cafes and they just instantly be like full of people. Like, where were all those people going before, Still kind of feel that way.
Here's somebody taped the ambient noise in Spangers before it closed. Party of 5 in the teak dining room. And there's also a lot more comments about ice cream. You seem to really hit a thing with ice cream. They're talking about Duvalese and giant concoctions at McCallum's, and people said you've got hit a certain nerve there with about ice cream places.
Everybody loves ice cream.
That's right.
So yeah, there was a specific question. Did anyone ever have one of those huge ice cream creations with friends at McCullum's? And then somebody said some names like the small nightmare, the large nightmare, and the sink.
I did once, I think. A bunch of friends and I had one of those. I don't know which one, but I sure, when somebody posted those names, it's like, oh yeah, I remember those names. I love McCallum's. I love their mint chocolate. Mint chocolate.
One of them was called the Pig Trough.
Yeah,
Was that there? I thought that was at Fenton's maybe.
I think you're right.
Oh, so
Somebody's asking if any of you are familiar with the Telegraph Avenue app. Please come in. It's a kind of virtual walking tour. I actually did that once. It's one of these things you can load to your iPhone and then go around and do the walk. I was thinking at one point of doing some of our walks as walks where that's sort of audio, but it uses the GPS fixture to track. So like you say, okay, go like here. Okay, now that you're at this point, it would tell you something, but it turned out to be kind of, I don't know, more tricky than I thought it might be, and I haven't done it. But there are some apps like that. There's one sort of like that for Telegraph Avenue, I think.
So it's a kind of then and now, right? I mean, you stand like at Sather Gate, and then you hear sounds or a snippet of Mario Savio speaking and things like that, right?
I think so. It's a while back.
Yeah. So yeah, Berkeley Historical Society was a partner on that.
Oh, okay,
And we
okay.
lent some photos and information, etc. Yeah, I've forgotten all about that. Thanks for mentioning that. Well, we're almost to the end, and I'm just looking at the questions about Bob's part. And oh, somebody asked, wasn't there a documentary about the teens of Walston Grove, Missouri?
Yeah, it was 16 in Webster, and it was like the year after I graduated. I was in college, still in the St. Louis area at Washington University, and CBS, I think it was, did this documentary, and they one of the people interviewed was this really brilliant young teen who was the younger brother of someone in my class, and her name was Aphrodite Matsakis. I can't remember her brother's name, but it kind of pictured Webster as being this sort of insular, doesn't know what's going on in the outside world, whatever sort of town. And for us college students, said, oh yeah, they really hit the nail on the head. People at Webster were terribly upset, and they wanted them to do a sequel that they could set the record straight and so on. But it did cause a bit of a stir when it came out it would have been about 65, something like that. Webster Groves.
Webster Grove. Okay, I'm not reading my own handwriting correctly.
Webster University is there.
Okay.
It was a Catholic girl, Webster College. It was a Catholic Sisters of Loretto Catholic Girls School, and then it became kind of like secular and coeducational, but boys as well as girls. And it's still there, Webster University.
So I actually have a question related to biking in parks. Is there a bike path map for people who want to know how to bike through Berkeley?
Oakland, Walk Bike Oakland has a good map that extends into Berkeley. Yeah.
Okay.
So I'd say, yeah, and it shows all the Berkeley boulevards, and they update it every year or two.
And where can one get that?
You know what? Let me go grab it, and I'll tell you.
Okay. And then I'm curious about the TikTok gathering outside the Normandy Village.
Well, I was walking with my neighbor in north of campus area, and we kind of intersected with this couple, middle-aged or slightly older than middle-aged couple, who were holding some pages. And I kind of looked at it and I realized it was pages printed out from our book. And she said, "Oh yeah," you know, when I said something, they had printed out some pages from our book because they didn't want to carry the whole book around with them, and they were really liking all the walk tours. And you know, I said I was the author and all that. And somehow we got on and said, "Oh, and did you know there's Normandy Village has become this huge thing on TikTok, and there's like huge numbers of, I can't remember which day it was, it's like sometime in the last week. There's huge crowds of people down there all taking selfies in front of Normandy Village on Spruce." So I guess you have to look up in TikTok. I don't use TikTok, so I don't know quite how you do that, but I guess you can look it up or something.
Yeah, curious. Okay.
I just wanted to mention Susan Dunlap is a novelist. I think she lives actually now in El Cerrito, but she has done back in the 80s a series of fantastically good crime novels. Her character is Jill Smith. She's a Berkeley cop. And Susan did a wonderful research before she would write each story. And one of them, called Too Close to the Edge, begins with the most fantastic paragraph describing Berkeley in all of its glory to those who've never been here. It's absolutely perfect. But her things are so well researched that it's wonderful to read Jill Smith, you know, trying to solve crimes, but living in Berkeley. And they're just very, very, very well done.
Susan Dunlap is the name?
Susan Dunlap, Dunlap. Susan Dunlap.
Oh, okay.
Really nice lady.
Great, thank you.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
I found the map, Janine.
Okay, I Bike Oakland, Bikeways map.
Yeah, and it does stretch into Berkeley. It's a really good map. And when I was looking for maps, does anybody remember this one?
Oh yeah, I've got one. That was the best map until the Path Wanderers map came along.
Yeah, yeah. When I went to journalism school, we were required to buy this map.
So somebody mentions that they bought their bicycle map at Velo Sport. And they mentioned that Velo Sport was the subject of Goins' first poster. So where is Velo Sport?
It was across the street from Goins's place. On
It was at Virginia and what's now Martin Luther King.
Okay.
It's been gone for quite a while now.
And then they moved to university in California, I think, and then they went out of business. They've been out of business for some years now.
Okay. So if one wanted to get this I Bike Oakland map now, where do you suppose you could get it?
You know, I'm just looking at it. It really doesn't have a lot of Berkeley. It has some of Berkeley.
Okay.
We need our own map.
Yeah, there's a project.
Yeah.
There is one that I have, but I don't, and it shows where the streets are the steepest. I think it might have bicycle paths on it because it was sort of aimed at people who were either walking or biking. So,
but they probably don't have the new protected bike lanes in because they're so new.
That's true, yeah.
Yeah, on Hearst and Bancroft and part of Adeline and so on.
I've just pulled up a map, Berkeley hiking and walking map, and you see Berkeley campus, bikeways, walkways, and street grades. I'm
This is online, right?
What's that?
This is online.
No, it's in my hand.
Oh.
And I probably bought it a long time ago. I'm looking to see, www.rufusguides.com. And it has a city of Berkeley symbol. So the city must have contributed to it, I guess. Can you guys see that?
Yeah, that's the one I was talking about. And I think we sell them at the History Center, don't we, John? If you're still here, John?
Yeah, we have had it, yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
so we all have to come visit the Berkeley Historical Society. We're closed for a couple of weeks, but our exhibit on African Americans in Berkeley will be opening on Sunday, May 16th with an opening event at 3 p.m. And also,
no.
Janet? Yes, in person. So
yeah,
we are open with this event will be in person. Of course, you should, wear your mask and we're going to practice social distancing and limit the number of people in rooms to 50%. But yeah, this will be our first attempt at having actual event in person.
Well, thank you.
Janine,
Yes,
the Pathways map shows bike boulevards on it.
oh, does it?
Oh,
Okay.
yeah, good point, Jackie. Yeah.
Great.
and I
Okay, I have a couple of those. I mean, hats off to you guys for making those maps. I was thinking, what an ambitious undertaking to set out to make a faithful map. And you were very involved in that. And I guess Paul Grunland was very involved in that, right?
Very
Jackie?
much so, yes. He was on the first of it, but there's a committee now that is very careful about updating it, and the details that they work out for accuracy is amazing. And Colleen Neff does most of that and works very hard at it. So with each edition, there's some improvements.
And for anyone that doesn't know, there's now a Jackie Ensign path.
Oh, I didn't know that. Congratulations, Jackie. Where is your path?
Right along the Solano, where the Solano Tunnel is, along Lower Los Angeles Avenue, between the Circle and the Arlington.
Okay, yes. Okay, thanks. Well, you certainly have done a, great job at the Berkeley as Path Wanderers. Okay, now we have something here from Mark Brooker. Berkeley, exclamation point, biking and walking guide, $4.50. Wow, that sounds too good to be true. And UC Berkeley campus map, 8th edition. Okay, and here it is. There's the website. So look in the chat and you can find that.
The 7th edition, which I have, was 2015. It does not say what the date of this is, but it's obviously been updated in the last few years. So that sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
Well, I want
Great.
to thank you for hosting us.
Okay, well, thank you to everyone, and you can go to the chat if you. I mean, we won't close this immediately. How about let's leave it open for a little bit in case people are too busy listening and they want to just go back to the chat and check out some of these links. They can always copy them and put them somewhere else.
Janine,
Yes.
there's a caller that has their hand up.
Okay, I can't see. Do you want to call on that person? Because I don't have that person.
Well, it just says
Yes,
call
hello.
in user.
Yes, that's probably me. My name's
Okay.
Lori, and I'm wondering if I did a walk through BORP with the Berkeley Path Wanderers for folks with physical disabilities a few years ago now, and I'm wondering if any of the maps have been updated at all to include accessible trails.
Yes,
Or pathways.
Yes, there's a wheelchair motif on some. My path actually is wheelchair accessible, and there's
Cool.
also, and on the new map, the number of steps for each path is indicated so that it's like Tamalpaya's path has 180 something steps up to it, and other paths have very little.
Gotcha.
So
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Thank you for
and-
doing that.
And my hope is people make donations so they can make more handrails, because I'm certainly not a youngster.
Right.
Yes. Thank you very
Right.
much.
Great.
You can get the map at berkeleypaths.org.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and it does have the wheelchair notations. And the bike.
Yeah, I'm also blind, but I will pass it along to my folks. Thank you very much.
I remember
Okay.
that walk. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, we'll do another one hopefully when we can go play again.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Okay,
was
yes.
great.
So Berkeley Historical Society will be having its fall walk series. So, if you have ideas for walks,
Tina Jones, South Berkeley.
yeah. So,
Jonesville.
contact us at info@berkeleyhistoricalsociety.org if you have
Will do.
ideas. Okay, I think it is time to wrap it up. So thanks to everyone, and we'll hope to see you at another Berkeley Historical Society event.